listening to the Leadership Woman podcast with me, Jill Saville. My guest today is Evguenia Jeitz. There we are, finally. And she lives and works in Luxembourg in the financial sector. But she will be talking a lot more about what she does outside of work, I'm sure. I know that she's president of one of the English-speaking Toastmaster clubs. I don't think we've talked much about Toastmasters on the podcast, so maybe this is an opportunity. So welcome to the Leadership Woman podcast.
Thank you very much, Jill. Many thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And I know that you understand how this works. We're going to go through your life story, really, and discover what you've learned along the way. So where were you born?
My place of birth is the snowy Siberia.
Snowy Siberia. So take us there, because I've not interviewed anybody who was born in Siberia. So how many years were you there?
Until the age of 18, more or less. So
Okay.
All my childhood was spent there.
So give me a flavor of it.
Well, I come from Novosibirsk, which is one of the biggest industrial cities in Russia. It's a city that was established just a little bit over 100 years ago. But it went through tremendous growth because it happened to be on the Trans-Siberian Railway. So some of the other cities that were much older and more recognized before, they sort of faded away, and it's Novosibirsk that became really the city of the region. There are about 2 million people living there. There is a lot of culture. There is one of the biggest opera theaters there, so big that when actors from Moscow and St. Petersburg went there over the summer, their decorations for the stage were not big enough. And at the same time, in Novosibirsk, there is also a little Silicon Valley, if you can call it so. So in the 50s, 60s of the 20th century, there was an academic city that was founded there, which is more or less 30 kilometers from the center of Novosibirsk, where you have dozens of scientific institutes like nuclear physics, biology, and where there is also a university. And I went to this university doing science, doing human science, French.
And you're blowing away all of my preconceptions of Siberia, because, of course, I'm British. I've only heard of it in films, and it certainly wasn't a good place. So it had a Silicon Valley then. It has a huge opera house. You were there till you were 18. And what about the culture that your parents gave to you?
How would you define the culture, Jill? Just maybe
I suppose I'm thinking of what values did you take away from them? Because I know you, so let me. I know you really well, and you've got a work culture. You've got a work ethic. You always want to be doing something, and I wondered where that came from.
Oh, okay, thank you. I can try to explain. I think that the most important value that I have taken away from my parents is love. I was bathing in love as a child, although I was the biggest child out in the big family of 4 kids. Yeah, and we were going through some really turbulent times. Now I'm trying to explain to my kid what the hyperinflation is, and she has got no clue, right? Like most of the people, but we were living all of that, moving from the Soviet Union to the 80s to the 90s, and then from the 90s to 2000 with hugest economical crisis. So life for my parents, I wouldn't say that it was very easy, though like when you say it like that, my father is a professor at one of the Siberian universities. My mother is a doctor. Yeah, but their life wasn't easy because they were not necessarily gaining. They were gaining much less than, for example, a worker, a construction worker. And the values that I got from them is really, first of all, is love. I have always been loved regardless of any external circumstances, and I think that this is something that gave me the energy that I have and that I'm sharing with others. And it helps me also, it helped me, it helps me, and I think it will continue helping me finding my right way in some maybe difficult situations.
Helping you to find your way through difficult situations, follow the right path.
Mm-hmm.
So your parents, one was a professor, one was a doctor, and if I understand you, they earned less than construction workers.
Exactly.
My goodness. But clearly there was an academic side. Knowledge was something that was a good thing in your family. And you went to America to study, is that right?
That's correct. And for that, I must say a big thank you to a famous mercenary who has done a fortune on a Forex deal, and his name is George Soros. George Soros, Hungarian financial specialist and very well-known person, was really, I think he fell in love with the concept of open society at a certain point. And he thought that when people speak to each other, they will never be against each other afterwards, that the communication is the key. And I was lucky to participate in one of his exchange programs, and was selected in this process, and I was among 3-4 students of my age. I think that we were around 19, something like that, to go to the United States for 1 year, where everything was completely taken care of, meaning the plane tickets, tuition studies at the university, like housing, money as well. So we just went there completely out of our comfort zone, out of our normal environment for 1 year, and after 1 year returned back. Yeah, so it's a nice story by itself, because even, Jill, some friends of mine, my boyfriend at the time, he was telling me, well, you will be a little bit losing 1 year, but when I look back, I must say that this year has given me much more that I could have expected from it. It gave me the possibility to see how the life is outside of the environment to which I was used to, get connection with new people, have a new perspective and view on life, because this is also when I started to study something completely different. I went there, I said, no, I don't want to do humanities or languages. I want to study economics for 1 year. So I kicked off with microeconomics, entrepreneurial studies for 1 year. And it was tough because I have never done it before. And some would say that you would not be able to do it because, you have always studied humanities. But then really working hard on it, asking good questions, being in good connection with professors at the university helped a lot and gave me such a new perspective that while coming back, I really wanted to pursue my economical studies, because I saw the perspective that languages are really important, but then on the other side, you have a possibility with the economical studies, like economy is really global, and things that happen some news affect the economy. And it's some sort of a balance as well. It's some sort
Mm.
of additional rules that, I don't know, manage the world, I would say.
So you left your home country, you went to America, you did something you'd never done before, which I think is a theme for your life.
You think so?
I think so. Your boyfriend thought, oh, you would just be losing a year. But it sounds like that gave you your taste for what life was like outside. So what did you do then? How long were you back in Russia before you moved out again?
I would say about 2 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
came back and it was a shock. Actually, it was a shock going to the States, and it was a shock coming back as well. And it was a little bit special situation because we during this program they were preparing us about it. You know, we had like special talks with psychologists as well, explaining, you know, you are some sort of experiment people, right? So we take you out of your natural environment, you get to a new environment, you will just have the time to adapt to this new environment when you will be back. Yeah. I came back to Russia. I pursued my studies at the university. And while being in the States, I always loved French. I really appreciated learning French language, and it was one of my specialization in Russia as well, to become afterwards the professor for French language at the Russian schools or Russian universities. And when I had an opportunity 1 year later with my university to go to Paris to do academic studies in one of the Parisian universities, I absolutely signed up directly and said, yes, it would be great. Because, you know, another thing maybe that I wanted to share is that I really was born and was grown up in a little bit closed environment, meaning I was born in the Soviet Union, and then afterwards in the big city of 2 million inhabitants, we just had, for example, to learn French, 2 native speakers, 2 out of 2 million people. That means that languages were learned always with books, sometimes with films. Yeah, but most of the teachers who taught me the language have never been in the country where English is native language or where French is native language. And I could see while coming back from the United States how important it was, and such a big impact it has when you are really in the environment of native speakers, and how it enhances your language skills. So I absolutely wanted to go for 3 months to France in order to improve my French. So I did. And so I did.
So you did, and you mentioned there that it was a shock going out, it was a shock coming back. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you describe that. I know that I felt, not that it was totally a different culture, but just coming out of the insular UK into a wider Europe, I appreciated that the world was bigger, and I did find difficulty going back to visit. So I can't begin to imagine what it was like for you. So you came out for 3 months then to Paris. What happened then?
I did studies on political correctness with my director of studies at Parisian University. It was really cool experience because I realized that my French was the French of Le Monde de la Libération. But clearly, when I could hear people on the street, I would not be able always to understand what they were talking about. So it was again a headache, but a headache, when I say headache, is in the States, my first week, I was a little bit like in the clouds, you know. from the fact of trying to understand what people tell me, not being able always to respond, and the mind was working 24/7 at 1000%, not even 100. And that was also the case in France. And once I finalized my studies, I came back to Russia. And at the same time, I actually met my future husband when I was in Parisian University. Yeah, so we decided that I could continue my studies in France. Yeah, so I finalized my studies in Russia, and then my director was very happy at the Parisian University and wanted to pursue the master degree with me and the research that I was doing. So I got an invitation from him, and more or less half a year later, when my studies were finalized, I subscribed to a Parisian university and did a master in political communication there. So this is the point when I actually moved to Europe. Yeah.
So earlier you said political correctness. You mean political communication?
Well, political communication was really the name of the studies, the diploma that I got, Master in Political Communication. But then it was the 5th year, so there were not that many courses actually to go through, but the main point was the research. And the research that I have done was done on political correctness. You know how we try to be tolerant, and sometimes with beautiful and sometimes even confusing words, are not saying things straight to the point,
Yeah.
but invent something else. And this is something that is widespread in French, as well in English, and that was the subject of my research.
Mm-hmm. So I digress there because I was curious as to political correctness. And is there such a thing in Russia then, political correctness?
I think so, but not as much as in French and as in English.
No.
We tend to be straight to the point, I would say.
Yes, yeah, straight to the point. So you met your future husband in the university. You found a way to come back and live in France. You continued your studies. You did your masters. What happened then?
Afterwards, I was then in Luxembourg with my diploma, and I wanted to work. Yeah, and because I have always been working. And by the way, it was very interesting situation. It was in Luxembourg. It's for the very first time I found myself in the situation when I was not working. I was just studying, and that's it. And for the very first time in my life, also, I didn't have my friends around me. Yeah. Because it's one thing when you move somewhere for 1 year, and it's another thing when you move somewhere definitely. Yeah, and also we all have our great friends that we have from high school, from the university. So here in Luxembourg, I had to do something from everything from scratch. I had to find people from scratch, and the difficulty was also that at that time there was no university in Luxembourg, which means that most of the people of, let's say, my age frame, potentially my interests, people with whom I could hang out, they were all over the Europe. They were not in Luxembourg. So really, I got those connections when I started working first in the publishing house, proofreading in English, and then afterwards being responsible for 21 proofreaders in different languages here in Luxembourg, as well as in Poland, because there was a daughter company in Poland, and we were those were really nice and a bit crazy times, because all the the publishing house was taking care of the publications on the of the official journal, European official journal. That means that some laws would be passed during the day, and directly they needed to be published. And for that, first they were translated, and then afterwards proofread. And we could not finish on our day until all the documentation of the day of the laws would have been proofread. Yeah.
And so you left publishing and you moved where?
To finance. Because at a certain point after 1 year, I really enjoyed working with people. We had a great team. But then I thought, okay, what do I do next? I really like finance. I really like economics. And how can I see the progress? What is the, let's say, the main skill of Luxembourg? What is the main point in Luxembourg where there is the possibility to progress, to learn the most? Yeah, and that was then, and it still is, though more diversified right now, but it was finance. So I applied to a position at a transfer agency that was retained within one of the big banks here in Luxembourg. And this is how my financial journey started. Completely from scratch, because I had no clue what the investment fund was when I joined.
So you had a whole range of things to learn again and operate
Absolutely.
again.
Absolutely.
And new people to connect with. So where do you want to move to now then? What was the important next step?
Jill, I do not know. It's a good question. I think that I really like the parts of, I would distinguish my work life and my passions. Yeah. So from my work life, I must say that I'm into the financial industry, and I do have diverse and very interesting responsibilities, which I enjoy. It's very diverse. But then on the other side, it's financial industry, and for example, my creative part is not necessarily being expressed there. Yeah, and as you know, I'm also fond of sailing. I really like sailing. I really like public speaking. Public speaking, to a certain extent, is very, very useful in finance as well, like everywhere, in whichever sphere. But for my creative part, I develop it on the side by playing the guitar, but by singing, by potentially thinking to release a CD this year, because back then, still in Russia, I composed songs, and then I recorded some of them a bit later, and most of them last year. In one of the studios here in Luxembourg, and I thought that this is an important part of me that I put on standby at a certain point, like all of us do, right? We do have our priorities, and I decided that I would like to bring life into this passion and do it.
So you put music on standby to a certain extent then, but it was certainly a big passion. You're a singer-songwriter. I can remember coming to your first concert in Luxembourg, and I know that you're hoping to publish a CD this year. Tell me a bit more about sailing, because Luxembourg is quite a landlocked country, and yet you decided, well, I knew you before. You said, I want to learn sailing. I want to be a trainer of sailing? What did you go off to be?
Well, right now I'm a skipper. I've got my skipper license. So technically speaking, that I received last year. I passed all the exams. So I've got an equivalent of permis mer. So it's like with in cooperation with the Royal Yacht Association and one of the associations here in Luxembourg. And how did I get into this? At a certain point, I just tried it out. I've got a friend whom I have not seen for over 10 years, and I met him in Siberia, where I came with my kids at a certain point, I think around 4 years ago. And we had a cup of tea or maybe a beer together in the evening. He told me, you know, we are going to a regatta next summer. And a friend of mine, he lives in the States. Yeah, so it's like his life completely changed. Mine also changed because since the time I divorced, many things have changed in my life as well. And it was nice, very nice to catch up. He was like, yeah, with my wife, we are going to regatta next summer. Would you like to join? And I said, looks interesting. But I thought it was something that was reserved only to a certain part of population, right? Mm-hmm. Sounds a little bit not for everyone. And I have never been there. I have never done it. And he said, why don't you try? I can tell you the dates. I can tell you the price. Yeah. And you can organize yourself. And it's true. As I knew it months in advance, you know, I blocked the date. It's like 1 week. And we went to Croatia. It was a regatta done in Croatia. And in 1 week time, I realized that, first of all, I really love it. And second of all, it's the whole different perspective that opened to me. Because, you know, when you are a pedestrian, you don't drive. You have one perspective. Then at a certain point, you get your driver's license. and you get an additional perspective. And with the boat, at the time, not the license, just the view on it, it gave an additional perspective as well, which was very interesting. There I met people who were responsible for trainings on a big tall ships, like a little bit pirate ships. The difference with the yacht mostly have triangular sails. Yeah, and big pirate ships, they mostly function on the square sails. Yeah, those are some triangular, but mostly square. And then I have tried it as well. And since then, I just understood it's my passion. And then you're right, Jill, when you say like Luxembourg is a little bit locked, wonderful country, but not at the shore. And this is exactly the thing that I told to myself. Evguenia, what are you doing? You know, you live in Luxembourg. you do not have access to the sea. Why in the world would you want to pursue that? But then, you know, Jill, I looked into myself and said, do you want it? And the me inside of me told me, of course, yes, this is absolutely something that I want to do. It's like, oh, all right. Then the circumstances will arrange themselves, isn't it? I should absolutely do it. And this is why I have done the skipper's license, and as well after the trip on the tall ship, I did also the training to become an instructor on the tall ships. So since then I've been around Cape Horn. I've been between Iceland and Faroe Islands and Norway. I've been around Denmark as an instructor. Last year I have been in Russian Arctic as an instructor, as well as in Iceland as well on a Dutch ship. And this year, if everything goes well, which I hope, in August I will go to Greenland as well with a great crew of Dutch crew on a Wildesfontein Dutch ship. Yeah, as an instructor, taking care of trainees.
Are you thinking about going anywhere warm? I can hear Arctic and Greenland, and my idea of a yacht and ships are, you know, somewhere warm.
But you know, it's very warm because on a tall ship you have to move a lot. You have to work with the sails and with the steering wheel. And like when you're lucky, you've got the right wind. So you adjust your course rear the wind. You have to adjust those sails. I wouldn't say all the time, but you're not cold. This I can tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you thinking about being going around the world single-handedly then, or?
That would be great. But for the moment, it's not something that I can do because I've got my obligations, let's say. I've got my plans. Yeah, I have to take care of my two wonderful children as well. Yeah, but later on, when I'm done working, that's my plan. I'd really like, I hope that I will be able to do that. And for that, I'm right now getting my experience. Yeah. And planning maybe it ahead.
Yes. It's funny, I asked that question because it just came into my mind that you're just the kind of person that would go and do that kind of thing. So it's no surprise there.
I would need a team, Jill. I would need a team of crazy people like me to do that.
I'm sure you could find them, but don't look in this direction. So you've got your hobbies, you've got your passions, as well as sailing, as well as your music. You also decided to go and practice public speaking, and you joined Toastmasters a few years ago.
Absolutely.
So
that's correct.
What does that bring you?
It brings me a whole lot, actually. As I was considering, I have heard about Toastmasters over 10 years ago. And I was coming from times to different clubs as a guest, but the timing was never right because I needed to block. Because when I engage myself into something, I want to do it right. I don't want to engage myself and disengage. I want to be sure that I have got the possibility to do it, an opportunity to do it, and the time for it, and financing and whatever. And the timing was never right. Either I had too much work, then I got kids, then they were growing up. And when I finally 2 years and a half ago, I thought, okay, and then I'll grown up, I can do it. I can do it. And I joined Green Heart Toastmasters Club of Luxembourg. And it gave me a lot of energy and a lot of inspiration. Why? Because I see, like, primarily I joined to be able to do speeches. Because this is a little bit going out of your comfort zone, being in front of a public. And with Toastmasters, it's only the first speech that you are doing with your notes. For all the upcoming speeches, you might have maybe a couple of words to guide you, but all the rest you have to pull out, let's say, of your head. You cannot have a printed text in front of you. And it's also the creativity part that really attracted me, because when you live different experiences, you want to share them somehow. And I did so through the speeches. And then after 1 year of being with Toastmasters, with the club, I was asked if I could become the part of the board of the club, being vice president of public relations, which I was very happy to hear and honored to accept. So there came additional leadership responsibilities that I didn't come into Toastmasters for, but that I had to embrace, and it was really interesting experience. And this year, after one term as a vice president of public relations, I was asked to become a president, and then I was like, really? Yeah, it was a great honor for me and a recognition from members of the club and for the former president that they thought of me. suggested me and voted anonymously for me. And somehow I ended up not having only to do the speeches, which I continue doing because I enjoy it so much, but also work with a great team as a part of the board, as the president, um, for the well-being of our club, which involves many things, which involves board meetings, which involves delegation, which involves leadership, working together, developing the strategy for the club, making sure that our members are comfortable and happy and are learning and are not too comfortable either,
No.
that they progress as well. So it's tough to say in one word what Toastmasters give to me, but certainly many things from the leadership perspective and from expression perspective as well. I noticed that since that time, that I joined, I'm now able to voice my opinion much better than I used to.
Yes, and anybody listening who's interested in Toastmasters, of course, I think there's at least 5 English-speaking clubs in Luxembourg. And the natural ability, the confidence that it gives you, that's sort of expected, isn't it? That's what we go for. We go to learn to speak and to be more confident. The other things that you talk about, though, we have to be engaged, we have to be committed, because we are there as part of other people's development. It really is a shared experience. And then there's the leadership, that if anybody isn't already in a leadership role, this is the place to go to. And what I like about Toastmasters is that you're a leader one year and then you're back on the board another year. The head goes round, doesn't it?
Exactly.
The presidential role goes round, so you don't have to annoy people because they might be leading you the year after. So it really is quite an unusual organization, I think. So I did ask you, over the years, what are 3 things that you've learned that you think other people might be interested to take away today? So what's number 1?
Thank you, Jill. So the first one would be being authentic and looking inside of you who you really are. The second one would be not being afraid. Not being afraid to go outside of your comfort zone, not being afraid to try things, to do the action instead of overthinking it and maybe correcting it on the way. And the third thing is how do you accomplish all of this in our busy lives, where we have got less and less time to accomplish things, isn't it? And where the pressure is big, it's doing baby steps.
Take baby steps, yes.
Yeah, taking baby steps, yeah.
Take baby steps. So be authentic. And there is so much in your life that I heard where actually you seem to just have a thirst for knowledge and trying new things. And you're going in one direction and then you very easily go off in a different direction. Humanities, okay. Languages, okay. Economics, well, then we're going into political correctness. And now you're into banking, finance. But the authentic, you are creative and you need to do that outside, is what I'm hearing. And don't be afraid. I absolutely know you as somebody who you do take action. You don't overthink things. And the decision to do sailing when you're nowhere near a shore, I think that's quite brave, because many of us would have talked ourselves out of it. Whereas you're thinking, actually, I'm learning, practicing for the future. Who knows? And the third thing, definitely, the baby steps. As long as you're going in the right direction, that's how we change our lives. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jill.
And talking about your journey through life so far. I know that you're a young woman and there's much, much more to come. I wish you all the best with your CD, and I think you're going to do some concerts this year, you said.
Absolutely, that's in the plan.
We'll look out for that then. Thank you so much for coming on the Leadership Woman podcast today.
Thank you so much, Jill, for having me. It's always such a pleasure to meet.
I'll see you soon. Thank you. And the hardest thing will be your name, I think. Evguenia Jeitz. Jeitz?
Jeitz. I think Evguenia Jeitz is fine.
Evguenia Jeitz.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And my guest today is Evguenia Jeitz. No. And my guest today is Evguenia Jeitz. My guest today is